Hi, I'm Jeannie Kelly, your credit coach. And today on Credit Over Coffee, I'm so excited to have Sean with me. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. I'm
I
glad
know,
this happened.
I know, long time, no talk. And you reached out and said you wanted to share your story, your credit journey. And I was excited that you wanted to share it. And I'm looking forward to hearing everything that's been going on in your credit world.
Well, with me, it's been quite a journey. Uh, Honestly, probably since I met you all those years ago.
Yeah.
But, as somebody who, I mean, just this year, learned so much about it, but that came from you. But, um, it's still a very big work in progress for me personally because there's so many things that um, I'm juggling. But, specifically with the career that I'm in, it is always kind of teetering one way or the other. And so that's the journey that I've been on since, honestly, probably since I graduated college. So, which is
Yeah.
was over a decade ago.
Time
I
flies.
know.
Well, I want
I
to talk
know.
about how we met
Yes.
because,
Seventh grade.
yeah, right. Seventh grade.
Seventh grade career day.
Yeah.
And, um, which, I can understand for people coming in and teaching to, what was it, like every 12 minutes or something, or every something that you were switching to a whole group of people.
Yeah.
Seventh grade, what are you, 13 years old maybe,
Yep.
and you're sitting there talking to people in the real world who have jobs and businesses, and you're not a police detective solving murders. You're honestly doing something that again, I mean, I didn't really understand it at that time. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't, but I remember asking questions. But obviously later in life, it's like they say, like when you want to challenge your math teacher, be like, when are we ever going to use math in the real world? But it's the same thing as this because credit affects everybody, every
Yeah.
single person. And so when you're listening to cool stories about, police detectives or other, rocket science, whatever it is on career day, credit affects every single person. And so obviously that day you brought up, I mean, you know, what most people probably wouldn't find like super exciting, but I think obviously what got my attention was it's the people that you deal with on a daily basis. Like that's cool, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where my career has led now. It's like, people don't really understand. It's
Mhm.
just that like I can be surrounded at any time by a bunch of cool people. And so we are all these years later. That was
I know. It was so long ago, Sean, and I remember who I was against, some of these, interesting careers. And here I am talking about credit. I brought in Monopoly pieces, Monopoly money, and bazooka gum. Because I'm
yes. Oh,
like,
I remember the bazooka gum. Yes, yes,
let me try to get their attention. And I was so happy years later, you were in college and you reached out.
yes.
And I was like, wow, it was worth my time. And so because of you, I continue going to schools and wanting to share, even if it's a snippet, if it's one thing that can get in your head, and I can help one child understand how important credit is going to be in their life. And so thank you so much for listening that day and staying connected. And yeah, a lot of times let's talk about your industry, right? Let's talk about your
Just
profession.
going off that note, I do remember basically from that day, and because obviously where we're from, it's such a tight knit, everybody kind of knows each other. And so I did get to, we did stay in touch throughout high school. And then when I went to college, and then, obviously well into my career, the broad way to put it is film and television. That's, again, it's kind of what piqued my interest all those years ago when I was asking questions, and because it's that those were people, and obviously not your only clientele, but those were people that you were dealing with, because again, it's everybody has financial burdens and hardships, but also some people are more successful and so they have tons of money, but everybody has to keep, credit in check. And so, so as far as my industry, yeah, that's where we're at right now,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and
well, it's true. And in your industry, there's been some tough times. I've had, if we go back a little, we had the lockdown and a lot of my performers couldn't perform, right?
mhm,
So, there was a scare, that income that was coming in, and then everything was canceled. What happens during that time? And then digging themselves out of that. And then, same with the writers' strike. And same thing, everyone, it doesn't matter what income level or what career path, we're all using credit. We're all
yes.
using credit.
Well, I will say, with film and television, and honestly, it kind of took me a little by surprise too. When you're young and you're aspiring to be, the next great athlete, the next great artist, the next great movie director, and looking at my time now in going on 2025 and looking back, I mean, I graduated college in 2013. And so, they say a lot can happen in a year. And so it'll be 12 years that I've, been out of college this year, this upcoming year. And looking back then, like when I got out of college, I would constantly get told, I was 21. I graduated early. That was my program, that was my school, and we can definitely get back into that. But I think there's this kind of where I started in the industry to where the industry is now is such a stark difference. And I think when I try to tell my story, at least to anybody that's kind of like getting out of college this year, or may have gotten out of college this past graduating year, and I've gone through a couple of phases in my career. I'm fortunate because I was lucky. I was a lucky person and I got into it and I was always working, and if anything, it only got busier and busier and busier and busier. And, I was essentially working in the golden age of television, as they say. There was streaming hadn't really taken off yet. Network and cable and all those shows you watch on TV weekly were still a thing, you know, and then as you say, COVID came, it affected everybody in the world. And for an industry like mine, that it used to be this like well-oiled machine. And so you have so many things that affected it in such a short amount of time. And a lot of people, I mean, especially just in the last 2 years, I mean, personally, like the career that I had versus where I'm at now is, you know, and I don't mean it in a negative way. It's just, almost falling off a cliff. Just, but that's for everybody because you came off of COVID. There was less productions out there. A lot of studios kind of essentially went bankrupt or merged or stuff like that during COVID because of streaming. And then the streaming bubble kind of burst. And, I could talk all of your ears off all day. And then you had coming off COVID, when, just in 2023, yeah, you had a writer's strike, but in full, transparency, when I was working my last big show, which was Wu-Tang, and at the time, excuse me, Fox was merging with Disney, and so there were still whispers in late 2022, like, oh, there might be a writer's strike. The writer's strike didn't happen for another 7 months after that, and so things really started to slow down. Writer strike happened in May of 2023. SAG strike happened less than, 2 months later. And so you had post COVID, which was already just tough. And then you had two strikes that took everybody out of the work. And then now you're, in 2024, um, I was fortunate that I got to work a movie during the strikes. It was an independent movie, but as far as 2024, it has been um, a bloodbath out there.
Right. So,
This, you
and
know.
you have a podcast talking about, right?
Yes, and so yeah, my podcast is it's called Thor's World because of the look. And so I try to the goal with that is to take people kind of behind the scenes and talk to just the everyday crew member. And
Mhm.
the people that I'm usually aiming for, people that well, obviously the crew members, there are a couple of celebrities that I've recorded episodes with that have yet to be released, and then only because I've gone through a revamp. But even people at the top like that have really had to, you know, obviously when you're a celebrity, and I think you probably know this, or someone that makes a lot of money really quickly that doesn't really know how to manage it, they spend it really quick, right? Or they kind of put themselves into a hole and that just destroys kind of everything. And so it's the same thing in that's kind of what the industry is celebrities, they come and go, right? And a lot of times because they're not smart about it, and a lot of the time when if you're not wealthy and you make enormous wealth, there's two kinds of ways, right? Where it's like, I'm just going to hire an accountant and do it that way. But most of the time, that's not really the case. It's like, okay, well, I'll just throw it into a savings account, But, people like that have even struggled. And so that's not really the purpose of what I'm talking about, because my whole intention was just overall, like, let's give you a real deep dive into the industry and have it from all angles. But I'll be honest, it's been a little depressing because people are really struggling because
Yes.
the money's not coming in, the jobs aren't coming in. And so that's been almost 2 full years of, uncertainty.
Right.
So plus all the industry changes too.
Yeah, it's
So
so hard. It's so hard. Financial struggle is real, and when you're in it, it's like, what do I do the best with all of these? Those are the phone calls I'm getting, Sean, all the time.
yeah,
Like, this is what I have. And I'm not a financial advisor. I have to sometimes, say, okay, you need this person for that and this person for this. But as far as your credit, here's the real deal.
yes,
This is what's going to affect your score. This is
yeah,
what you need to pay attention to the best that of your ability. So when I hear, a lot of times people will say, oh, I've never had a credit issue. Oh, you should have saved for a rainy day. Well, that's not like, I mean, it's not really normal. Like, even if you do save for a rainy day, did we know these things were going to be happening? And it, we just got to figure out what's the best to do during these bad times
yeah,
financially when it comes to your
yeah,
credit, if you can. And so that's why I love when people want to talk ahead of time, a little bit when they start seeing it happen, to say, this is what I've got left until my next paying job. So where's the best bang for my buck going to go with my credit report?
yeah,
And so that's a conversation I'm having daily. And sometimes it's after the fact. This is already has been hitting my credit report. What am I going to do? And, time heals all wounds, even on your credit report, but you have to do what you have to do. It's just navigating these
well, I
financial.
remember, no, I totally, and I remember when I was in college, and this was my mom actually opened my first credit card. Well, she actually opened two for me, and I didn't. One card I never used. It was a Macy's card. I was like, I go to Macy's. It's not no digs or anything, but it's like I don't really know what I ever got at Macy's. I think it was some ties, maybe a suit one time, but that's once a year. And I had a very low credit line, and then I don't know. Because again, this was just the knowledge that I didn't have, and to my um recollect, like just thinking back on it, it was nothing that they ever teach you in high school. Definitely didn't learn it in college because I went to film school, but I was 18 my senior year of high school, and obviously that's about the time you can apply for a credit card on your own, right? Yeah. And so my mom had actually opened a Capital One for me as well. And again, this was me having no idea. Like, oh, you can use that credit card, but then you have to pay it back. That's how you build your credit. And I was just using this card like because I'm in college and it's willy-nilly. And it's like because I didn't open it myself, and this isn't like I was angry at my mom. I just had no knowledge of like, oh, okay, so there's a monthly payment, spend $10 here and there, pay it off right away, and or for emergencies if you're in a pinch, and then you have time to pay it off, and that's what builds your credit. And I think, you know, that was my I just didn't even know that at the time. And so I went basically 2 years without paying that credit card off. And
Mhm.
then, you know, when I was out of college, like I'd always wanted an Apple desktop. And so Apple at the time was in partnership with Barclay. And boy, oh boy, looking back on it now, huge mistake, but I wanted it. And they're like, oh, if you open a Barclay card here, get your desktop. And so then I didn't realize like, interest, and I had no idea what that meant. And then I really knew when I was like getting these, it's like pay $50 and then my next payment is $45. And it's like I don't like or it's like $55, so it's like it just all of that knowledge I had no idea even when I was into my career. I hate to say it. I just, we it never it never dawned on me to just like go onto Google and
Right.
look up what this means. And you probably would have gotten a million different answers. And so, again, and that's kind of just, in my mid 20s and trying to figure all that out. And I realized maybe it's not that hard, but maintaining that and being in such an uncertain career, everything was just hitting me at once because, and I say uncertain is because, you can be on a hot streak and work, and then you could go months without a job because it's just a freelance industry. That's how it is. And
Right.
you're in a lot of competition. And so, again, that's kind of where our paths crossed because I was just in credit doomsday at that point.
Right. Like a lot of people, they just start, no one, we usually learn about credit when we're making a mistake. That's usually what happens. And just like you said, you'll go on Google where, ooh, I hear that and sometimes say, oh, there's so many answers, but you reached out to me. So that was fantastic because then when you have a specific question like that, I'm able to say, listen, Sean, when you can, pay those off, keep them
Yeah.
open. We don't think about the interest rates, and the healthy way to use credit is playing a game with it when we can to use the cards, rack up our points, but pay it off before that interest, right? So
Yeah.
you're using it when we can that way, navigating it. So then credit's a fabulous tool and it is a way to build wealth. When I hear people say, how is that possible? It's a huge way to build wealth because when we have that good credit score, and let's say, Sean, we're buying a house, right? And you're getting a mortgage. There's a big difference between 5% and 8% on your mortgage for 30 years. Do the math, and you could see how much money credit can save you or cost you. Imagine all of that money between 5% and 8%, just as an example. Could you imagine if all of that money extra in interest, instead of giving it to the bank, you're giving it to a financial advisor to invest for you? So that's
Yeah.
what I talk about when I say building wealth and using credit cards as tools to get to that bigger item when we can, when there's not the financial struggles. And listen, I got in this industry because I had bad credit. So, like, I've
Mhm.
been there. I know what it's like to not be able to get a credit card. I know what it's like when you rent a car and if you have your debit card, they're not going to rent to you. They wanted that credit card. And
Mhm.
so I've been at that counter where they're like, no, you can't rent the car. How embarrassing. I've been there. So we do need to use credit. You know, I feel like sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, you don't need credit. what are they talking about? Even if they
Yeah.
don't want to not get into debt. I'm not talking about getting into debt. I'm talking about renting a hotel,
Hmm.
traveling, and why
Yeah.
not get those rewards when we
Yeah.
can? That's the good
Yes.
side. You know, when we're into that good side. And like I say, I've been there. I've been on the bad side. I've been on the can't even rent a place. My credit was so bad. So I know the difference and how freeing it feels when you have that access to credit and not worrying about your card getting declined and all that, you know, because I've been on both sides and not just once. You know, credit's that thing. It's up and down. It follows your financial path, you know,
Yeah.
kind of like a diet, right? We're never done, right? If we're
Yeah.
trying to stay healthy and work out, it's the same thing when it comes to our money and our credit, and so that scale can go up and down just like your credit score.
And you know, that was the other thing too, is because I mean, early on in my career when I wasn't, you know, financially at a point yet, it was like, and you know, I was never the kind of person that just used my credit cards for like, I had no idea what rewards meant. It was just like, oh, use it, you know, to pump gas and get 3 times. And again, that's just going back to me being a terrible at math. But the irony is kind of what my job was at that point, was just like, wait, you know, you should know this. And so, you know, that was the other thing. I was just using them. I was just using them, and then I wasn't paying them off. And then I didn't understand. And then it's like you miss a payment, the interest, all that stuff was just piled on early on when I was, you know, in New York City and trying to make it. And it's like, you know, it's like, well, I don't have income yet, you know, I'm focused on paying rent. And so I was smart enough to know and realize at the time, maybe they didn't do it anyways, but like you can't use a credit card to pay your rent, stuff like that. I think nowadays it's kind of free reign to my understanding, but I had no idea what I was doing. And that was kind of the scariest thing. And again, you know, going back as to why I reached out to you, you know, and I remember we had our first initial call, and I think I reached out to you, but right before I reached out to you, I had reached out to a company that consolidates all your debt. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And then you kind of listen to what they were offering. And even as someone who has no idea, I was like, well, that sounds awful because uh, it just makes it worse. And then you're really going to have trouble getting anything in the future. And that's just the scariest thing. And you know, it scared me. And so what it did was it kind of lit a firecracker underneath me, or lit a fire, I should say, and that like the scariest thing to me right now is if I miss a credit card payment or like spend it and then just not pay it off immediately. And I know, you know, I don't know what the best take on that, you know, or what you would say to that is like, you know, do you want to pay it off right away? But that's just what I've been scared into, only because of just where I've been personally. So,
Right. And we don't have to be afraid of credit, but it is funny. Like even Cassandra, my daughter, says she gets petrified if she's like a day late because
yeah.
she's lived with me through the highs and lows. She's my daughter. She knows what it was like when financial tough times are. So yes, using credit where you don't want to pay anything late on your credit report. You don't even want to pay it late that you have to pay the late fee. Why waste the money? So it is a good habit to get into using your credit cards. And I try to think of them as debit cards in the sense I'm not going to use it unless I have the money. And then when we get to this point, if possible, right? And then yeah, you can go online. Everything's so easy and pay it every Friday if you want, or pay it
Yeah.
every. So it never builds up a lot. Even, you know, I like showing a small balance, you know, showing activity on an account on my credit report. I do like that. I think it's healthy credit, but it's never maxed out. And one thing, Sean, and I hear it every single day, no matter what, every single day, I hear people say, oh, I know I should keep my balance at 30% to the limit. And that's not true at all.
Mm.
It's because, and I think this is why, it's 30% of your score, the balance is. And people get confused thinking that means leave it at 30%. No, the lower the balance, the better for the score. So, no, you don't have to have a high balance like that. So, if you can, that's what I do. I just every Friday I pay my bills, and it just keeps it manageable. And you're also really paying attention because there's so much, charges that might not belong to you or things going on with identity theft. You kind of stay in check when it's because it's not overwhelming. You're just doing it every single week. You know where you were that week. The receipts are easy. And I am that person that double checks everything.
Yeah.
I keep those receipts handy all the time just to make sure. And that's the way to use credit. Healthy, fantastic. And then when you go to the bank, when you need your mortgage, right, or an auto loan or whatever it may be, you have that good score from managing credit cards, in a good
Eh,
way.
But the crazy thing is you're talking about all these things. I mean, identity theft, and I personally haven't watched like live TV because of streaming and everything, and everything's like on Amazon now, and it's like that's where you watch football, and so like when I used to watch news, whatever like specific news channel it would be, just like whether it was like on a CBS or I would only ever see ads for like Credit Karma or free credit report, all that stuff. I obviously when I was younger, I didn't know what that meant or like why it mattered to me. But that's the only time I ever really, excuse me, see ads talking about credit and what happens if identity theft happens, which I mean now more than ever, especially with AI coming into the fold,
Yes.
has never been more serious. And I know so I guess, my question kind of for you would be if you're, you know, whether you're like super techie or just not a care in the world to be spending time on the internet or watching TV, and you're just an avid book reader. So, like, what would your advice be for a young me who has, I maybe I could have been a better student in high school. Maybe they did teach it and I missed it. But like, you're going off to college, you're 18 years old, you're going to be on your own. You want to be able to take care of yourself, and but then you want to go into an industry that isn't necessarily like mine, like it's an art freelance kind of industry. What would you say to that high school student or that graduate, I should say, that's going out there into the world? What would your first piece of advice be for that person?
Well, as far as you have to do what you love. So if that's your industry, there's
Yeah,
many jobs out there that it's until our next paycheck, like a realtor.
yeah,
They work and it's until the next house sale or so there's many industries that you're getting paid commission or
hmm,
at certain times.
yeah,
And so as far as someone 18 with their credit, because you do want that tool. You do want to have a foundation, and the earlier the better. Not waiting till you graduate 23, 20. Now you lost all those years of length of history. So 18, get the student credit card. But again, don't be afraid of it. Say, well, I know I have this much money that I have maybe you have a part-time job going to college or you get money in from family, whatever it may be. Use the card for things that you're going to pay anyway, but instead of using the debit card, use the credit card to show activity and to show history, good payment
hmm,
history, and paid in full when the bill comes. So that's fine. And do those things and build your credit with the student card, maybe a secured credit card if you're not going to college and just going out into the workforce, you still want to build credit. So get the secured credit card 6 months later, because it takes 6 months to get a credit score. So you have to have that account for 6 months. Then go into a store that you said Macy's, it doesn't matter if you use the card once or twice a year, it's still going to show
yeah,
activity. Get the store card. And do you know, Sean, years later, sometimes I'll have people say, and look at you, it's been 15 years or whatever since you've been using credit. That Macy's card is a fabulous card still because of the
Yeah.
length of history it's giving you. And I've had
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, should I close that?" Absolutely not. It's free. It's not charging you anything. And actually, you want to pull it out of your wallet every once in a while to show activity. Keep it open. Don't let them close it on you because you're not using it. So that's my advice. If that's the industry you're picking, you need to surround yourself with a team. And that's why I love my podcast or my go to the Instagram, find free posts, free information, and learn to build credit and let credit empower you, not
Mm,
scare you. I want to change everybody's fear of credit to you when you use it in a healthy way. Like, I didn't learn to use it that way, so I felt the bumps and the financial struggles. I would love it if I would have known at an earlier age how important it is and how doors can be slammed in your face when you can't have that credit, and how scary it is. Everything costs you more money when
mhm.
you're in the hardest time of your life. Like, I know now I have bad credit and everything's costing me more. My car insurance was costing me more. I couldn't get the place I wanted to rent. So that you could be stuck in a place paying more because they know you're a risk.
Yeah.
Everything. So it takes longer to dig yourself out. So my advice is put a team together, not just a credit expert, at, deal with a banker, learn about where to put some emergency savings funds,
Yeah.
and until your next gig, right? And try,
Yeah.
again, talk to a financial advisor, and
Yeah.
build that an accountant, build that financial team, because we all know we're making money, but we're not knowing, we don't have that team, especially at a young age or even 30s, 40s. You don't think, unless you're a bazillionaire, that you need a financial advisor. And some
No.
financial advisors won't talk to you, right? Unless you do have that million, 10 million. So you got to find where that niche is for you. And you've got to plug yourself in, because you work hard for your money and you want to keep that money, right?
Yeah.
And not let it go to
Yeah.
the banks.
Well, years ago, I mean, he's a dear, dear friend of mine. He's an actor. He was on a show that I was working on, and obviously way, way wealthier than the crew. And he was like, "Oh, why don't you just talk to your accountant?" I was like, "Accountant? Who do you think? What do you think I am?" I mean, I was like 23 at the time, but I was like, you know, um, and you realize kind of what their job is to make sure um, you don't make mistakes. And so, but if you're a kid or maybe you're just not financially well off, and so, uh, again, just going back because I had all these credit cards, and it's kind of nice. Like one of the credit cards that I have now, it was the card that hung over my head for the longest, and it was because the interest was insane. And again, that's partially my fault because I didn't know, and so I wasn't paying it. And then, but now I have like this insane tax credit line,
Mhm.
and so like I literally know if like the world ended and all the money in my personal checking just went out the window, it's like I still have this credit card that has a huge limit on it. And the thing is I don't touch it. But I think it's personally because I'm so scarred from, having to pay off every card at a time when I didn't, it's like, wow, am I going to eat this week or am I going to make sure that I make my credit payment because I felt like that was so important. And especially with, living in New York City, how hard it is to find an apartment, you know,
Mhm.
you have to make X amount of times the rent. And if you can't make the rent, then you have to bring in a co-signer, and that co-signer has to do well. Obviously this was my early days in New York City, and I think again, I just didn't understand the importance of it. And then when it's like you talk to people and like, well, yeah, it was no problem for me because I have a 780 credit score, or I'm literally at 800. And so, I think personally, because I've kind of always looked from behind, and like, I remember when I had a really bad credit score, that's when we got in touch again. And again, I didn't even know what I was going to talk to you about. Just like, I don't know what to do. I mean, obviously it's a part of it is financial because you have to make those payments. If you're going to borrow money, you have to pay it back. And sometimes you feel like you have ultimate power when it's just like, here you go. Here's this little piece of plastic that can either make your life great or it can destroy you. It can destroy your confidence. It can really kind of do a number on you. And it's like,
Yeah.
and so that's where I was for a long time. And I didn't hit until it was already too late. Like I just, and I love talking about it because I came back from it, and I was fortunate enough to have people like you, but I was in fear, and I think today I'm still in fear of, having bad credit when I had bad credit. And so that's like my biggest fear is like, I do have credit cards with all zero limits, and every time I take one out, like if there were a couple times like my debit card from Chase, like maybe the chip was malfunctioned or something, and it's like I have to take out my credit card and use it, and I would tense up and be like, oh man, and so that's just where I'm at, even till today. I hate to say it,
I think
but
we have to talk more often so you can take that fear out, because I remember when you were struggling, you have done a fantastic job. And I think sometimes we need that pain if we don't want to get back into the trouble, right? And
yeah,
max out that card. Like I hear you say you have zero balances and high limits. I love that for you. And
yeah,
I love that you're in control of it. But I also don't want you so full of anxiety, like of fear, because you're not going to do that again, Sean. You've been like looking. So I think we're going to schedule some calls so you can
yes, yes,
feel good about it. You've come such a long way. You've done so many fantastic things because of how you controlled your credit, and you
yeah,
own things now. Like it's beautiful, but it is true. It is real that getting into trouble and eating, paying off your bill, you got to think of your financial future with your credit,
yeah,
is
yeah,
you got to rebuild it. Even
yeah,
during bad times, we got to get back in and think you're not going to never use credit again. So what are we going to do during the bad times? And
yeah,
that's a step-by-step program. And like you're saying, that actor said, get an accountant. Well, sometimes if you can't afford an accountant,
yeah,
start listening to things, find a podcast talking about accounting.
yeah,
So until you make the money where, yeah, let me have an accountant, let me have someone do this, and have that build that financial dream team. There's so
yeah.
many things out there for
Oh
free.
yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
there's a guy on YouTube who I did again, it just kind of because YouTube and LinkedIn are about the only social media I have these days. So he's a YouTube personality and he has a pretty big following, and he doesn't just he talks about everything, mortgages and all that stuff, and the way that he edits his videos and all that stuff is obviously like very sophisticated, so it catches on, and it's like this is what it means, this is what you can do, all that stuff. But again, I think um, 10 years ago, because YouTube is just blown up, it's like
Yeah.
we do have so much more access to information. I think the
Yeah.
scary part is I mean, I know you, so I trust you, but like the scary part is there's so much of that out there, and it's like you'll have one conversation with someone like, oh, I check my credit karma, but then it's like, well, you talk to another person, it's like, well, I actually do free credit report, or you talk to another person and it'll be like, none of that matters. You have to look at your um, credit wise or FICO, and so it's like, I mean, I know that better now because I have a car. um, I was in New York City, so it's like you rent apartments, so that obviously they have to do credit check among other things too. So, it's really kind of being able to understand that, and you know, that was my confidence for a while because I had built. I mean, it's still my confidence. It's why at the same time, as much as I have anxiety about it, and I do, even to this moment, I'm thinking about it, but it also feels confidence when someone says like, oh, well, you have really great credit. Because I know
Mhm.
where I've come from. I know I came from 500 credit and I worked my way back up
Yep.
to having really good credit and just being really, now it's because obviously you get older and so more things come about. You're not, I have a wife now. And so that
Yeah.
factors into it because everything is kind of combined. I have a daughter now, and so it's like, it's kind of wild. And then it's like, conversations of houses and all that stuff. So it's like I do feel confident, but then it's like there's just going to be over the next, granted, I make it, 50 years,
Of
it's just going to
course.
start to kind of just, it's going to branch off. It's going to be a giant tree, because you're planting the seed, obviously, when you want to build your credit. But then at the end of your life, it's a giant tree, it's a giant redwood. And
Yes.
that obviously affects it. And so you want to be able to make sure that the next people in your life can continue on with that and understand your lesson. So now, because I know you, and when my daughter's in seventh grade and meets you at career day, I'm going to make her ask those questions. Just be like, yes, ask. But no, it's that's just the having the real understanding of it, and because it's like, you know, maybe not the best analogy, but not everybody has 10 fingers, but everybody has credit, right? So it's across the board. That's what we literally all, I would say, if we have nothing in common, that's what we all have in common,
Yeah.
because we're not all born the same way. So, but we do in order to get things in life. And there are plenty of people that I've known in life that somehow they're surviving
Hmm.
and they have 300 credit limits, and so it's wild to me. And I know earlier I brought up um, consolidation, and that's actually something that my brother ended up doing to get out of a pinch. But his interest in his it's through the roof. It's absolutely insane. And
Mm.
I had told him, you should have just like, why didn't you tell me about it? Not that he would have known that, but at the time I was like, I could have told you like flat no. Like I'd rather be, broke and down in the dumps than do something like that, because it I chose to be, broke and just living literally on by a thread because I mean, again, I'm fortunate because I knew you, but I had already had that conversation before you and I got in touch. And I don't know, it just felt like common sense to me. Maybe it's like the street smarts versus the book smarts, but it just felt like, no, there's something in my gut that was like, that doesn't sound like it's going to make anyone's problems better. So I'm
And I
pretty
think, Sean,
fortunate.
you said something interesting when you said it was your brother and he didn't come to you. I think that we have to talk about financial things more often with our family. People sometimes don't want to, they'll feel judged. So if you can't with your family, you got to plug into a place where you will feel safe to talk
Yeah.
about it, because that's the whole conversation. And it's funny you also brought up a tree, because I'm doing a new course, Empower Your Credit, and the
Mm,
logo is a tree, because
mm,
it does start. I want that solid foundation, and it does start with your credit when you're building that wealth. And like you're saying, the branches of this credit card, that student loan, this auto loan, another credit card, and just letting it grow and flourish. And sometimes there's some broken branches, and
mhm.
but you can still heal your credit report. There are ways, just like you did, you rebuilt it, you're in a better spot, and now you know how to navigate in your industry. You know how to navigate with how your income's coming in, what to do with your credit, and you're doing a fantastic job, obviously.
Well, I
So
appreciate that. I'm trying. I'm still anxious, as you can see. It's
yeah.
just, I think of, because obviously everyone's situation is differently. My mother, she's a single mother of five children. She raises kind of on her own. So she kind of, she took a beating in her credit basically for all of us, right? And
Mm.
so, but like even till today, and I'm not saying I'm just saying it's just like when you're five kids, like yeah, you gotta do what you can to survive.
Right.
Trying to raise five kids between the ages of 1 and 7, and
Wow.
um, yeah, so that's where we
Yeah.
are. So I'm 7 years from my oldest sibling, and I'm the youngest,
Oh,
and so you know in 2025, because I'm 92, but like it's, I don't know if it's just because, we're at this point in society where like everybody's just trying to make a quick buck, right? Credit card companies, et cetera, because they know it hasn't stopped her from getting approval on things, or obviously her payments are going to be higher and stuff like that, or anybody that's got, you know maybe has good credit, but because of where their history, what that looks like, obviously, as you said, people are paying attention to the risk of how much of a risk you might be if
Right.
you're going to get payments on time. And I remember anytime when I was younger going somewhere with my mom, she's like, well, I've always paid things on time. That's never been an issue, stuff like that. But like, again, was there ever a time before my time where a credit company would be like, no, like we're just not going to give you a credit card? Because
Oh, of
now,
course.
what I'm seeing is just like, yeah, you're approved. I
Yeah.
see it a lot.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've had people, they call all the time, they were declined,
Yeah,
and their scores are, I mean, they're declined, and that their scores are that low that they can't get it. Listen, I know I was declined for
yeah.
credit cards back in the day. So yes, there are some creditors who are willing to charge a big, maybe annual fee to get you in if you have bad credit, but you just want a credit card, and listen, I had to do that. I'm a perfect example. I had to, and that's why I say it always costs you more money when that's the time you need it the most, right? But I said, listen, I have to pay this ridiculous annual fee for this card. And they're only giving me like $100 limit. But you know what? I don't care. The interest was outrageous. So, I didn't use it for that. I just used it to get a card again and to show on time payments and just rebuild my credit. So sometimes we have to do that. We have to pay the price, or
Hmm.
we get locked in on a higher interest rate for a car loan. But
Hmm.
if you can, let's say you have to, I remember my car, here we are in New York, and when it rained, my windshield wipers didn't work.
Hmm.
And so here I am, poor, like sitting as a waitress in the parking lot. My shift was over, couldn't leave to get home
Yeah.
to my daughter because I couldn't drive safely, And then I found out about Rain-X though, and it really did help for a little
Rain-X
bit
is the
of drizzle.
best.
But
Yes.
I mean, the point was when I could finally get a car, I did have to pay a higher rate. But
Yeah.
I knew, well, I might have to pay a higher rate at this time in my life, but that new account's going to help me. And then I was able to refinance that car 18 months later for a lower rate. So for 18 months, I paid a higher rate, but
Mm.
then it went better. So, there are times we have to do certain things to invest back into our credit.
Yeah.
And but no, there are people who still get declined, but then there's the ones who they do get approved and it's an outrageous rate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's
So,
so much.
what would you tell someone when it's like, because sometimes it's already too late, right? Obviously they're
Right.
calling you because it's too late. So it's like, where would you draw the line and say, maybe you have this opportunity to get in front of a situation where maybe someone calls you strictly just about advice, where they actually didn't go ahead and do something. Where do you draw the line? Where do you just say, hey, you know what? Like, it's not in your best interest to
Oh
do
yeah.
any of
All the
this.
time. During, like, I'm a bottom line kind of gal out of New York. So
Yeah.
sometimes people don't like what I have to say, but you're calling me for the advice.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the advice is, no, you have to hang tight. And I
Hmm.
say this daily during my coaching sessions, like, I know you want to hear that you want me to say this is,
Yeah.
you should do this. The answer is you have to sit right now. You have to
Yeah.
sit. You have to pay off these things. Don't take that uh if unless sometimes they're like, oh, I want to take a home equity to pay off all my credit cards. Now listen, I'm not a financial advisor, and
Yeah.
maybe sit down, and that's when I say talk to this person, talk to that person. Sometimes feel the pain, because when you feel that pain of paying off those credit cards, and because I've seen people get that home equity, pay the credit cards off, and then use those credit cards right over again
Mm.
because they've never felt, they're not feeling that. So there's so many, but again, that's when I bring in other team experts and share, because I'm just talking about the credit and the score and what's going to help them. But a lot of times, Sean, that's why I love talking about this with you, because I want to get out in front of everyone to talk about credit before the trouble,
Yeah.
instead of getting the phone calls where my heart is crushed every single day, because
Mm.
I've been there. So I know that feeling of the knock at the door because you're going to get a summons for
Mm.
a charge off account, or your electric turned off. I feel that pain, and those are the calls that I just try to help the best that I can to navigate them in a short amount of time, to give them some relief. And but if in the perfect world, follow me ahead of time. This hopefully your audience, because of us connecting, can say, oh, let me tap into listening what Jeannie has to say, and they can call me ahead of time. And when we work together, that's why I even love with my clients, we do quarterly reviews. So once you're my client, I almost feel like you're always my client. I want to check in all the time, because I don't know what's going on in your world 2 years from now, if things can be totally different. So checking in is a great game plan too.
Yeah, no, I totally, it's crazy because the industry that I'm in, you could literally go years without talking,
Right.
and it's, I think during the day I would have 3 hours of, and I say freedom loosely, it's just because you're always finishing the day before and prepping for the day next. And so it's, uh, but it got to a point after you and I got in touch where I was literally doing everything I could at work, obviously, because that was the only place that I could do it, because, on weekends I was just sleeping for 2 days straight. But it was really kind of paying attention to that and really kind of, you know, like I said, it wasn't financial freedom to me meant like just because it's been my whole life is you kind of have to figure it out on your own. So you never really lose that aspect of your life. I think I could say the same for you. It's you got into the business because you were once there. Um, and so you knew how to navigate that, but because you're where you came from, obviously it helped you navigate that whole thing and how to build a successful business off of it. And for me, it's because it was hardships, as I mentioned, it was, single parent, five siblings, or four siblings, in this case, five of us all together. And it was, it was just, you had to figure it out. And in most big families, that's usually the case. You just kind of had to figure it out. And I think I'm fortunate because I am growing up in a time, or I grew up in a time where, you know, advancements in technology and all that stuff, and how you get information um, at your fingertips. And
Mhm.
so you can kind of go and look at that stuff. I mean, we have AI that can search things for you in an instant. And so, but, even all that being said, it's still kind of the human emotion that I think you really need because, as you say it, people call you every day, and it's a sad story to hear what they have to say. And that's the human emotion. And I think hearing it directly from somebody, whether it's like, hey, you're an idiot, don't do this, that's kind of the person I am. It's like you just have to kind of slap me upside the head and be like, look, this is how we can do it. And there's obviously many ways you can go about that. But that's kind of been the biggest lesson. But the other thing too is what I kind of pay attention to, and it depresses me as well, is like, you hear how much like national debt, that we're in with when it comes to credit cards. And that is, when you hear people are behind up to 3 months on their payments, and it's like, it has nothing to do with me because fortunately, like I figured it out. And, maybe I have a slip up here and there, but it's, that's the troubling thing to me. And it's because I've been there before, and I think about all those people that really, and, maybe it's just a financial thing for them, like they physically can't do it. And that's kind of where it goes for me because I decided like, do I want to eat this week, or do I want to pay my minimum payment on a credit card just to not affect my already bad credit at the time, or eat some crappy bodega food in the city. And so it was, that's that's been my journey in all this. And I think what's kind of, with the state of the industry and the course corrections that it's trying to do, nothing is certain. And so I've been in this very, I would call it a void, because I should be kind of on top of the world, right? I'm married, I have the best wife, I have a beautiful, daughter who is my light. And it's because there's so much uncertainty, it's like being frozen in time, but time is still carrying on. And so there's a lot of people that are affected by it. There are a lot of people like me in the same position, but probably unfortunately for them, they're probably just racking up that credit card debt too. So
Yeah.
where it could
And
take
I think that's
years.
nice that you can. This is why we want to have this podcast, because you wanted
Yes.
to share your story, to share a light for someone else. And that's why I love talking about this. And I'm so glad you were so open to say, hey, I didn't know what I was doing. I messed up things, but you're on the other side. And it's great sharing that story, because someone listening, you're helping them right now,
Well,
because
I listen to you, Jeannie. That's I will give you full credit where credit is due is, I mean, I think not to, um, there's nothing, there's never not a nice thing I can say about you. And so, all those years ago, I was just I'm curious to this day. I'm so curious about everything. So when you started throwing out things, I was curious about it. But I will say I'm only where I'm at because I listened to you. But I'm fortunate for that. And a lot of people don't have that. And so I'm so thankful and I'm so lucky for that. And I have there are two little there's no angel and devil, it's two angel genies, but they're just like they're whispering like, are you sure? Are you sure? And not that you were ever that kind of person saying like, you know, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that. It was kind of just like this is what you have to do. It's not no, you can't, it's what you have to do. And however you're gonna do it, for me, it was tackling the credit card that had the smallest limit first and then going out. And that's exactly what I did. And so it worked. It was tough. And it was, early on in my career when I had already, I mean, I shot both of my feet, basically. I had done it to myself and I had no idea what I was doing. And I love talking about it. And I love talking about how it came to be because I had you to help me. But, um, I could still say even to this day, I should be talking about it more and I should be talking to other people about it more, not because I'm trying to sell, but because I'm like literally there is a way. There's a will, there's a way. And that's where I'm coming from. But, the reason I think about it more in full transparency is because I'm seeing what's happening to my industry in real time. And
right,
like I said, when I started my career, I was in the golden age of what I thought would last forever. And I see it now, and it looks like it might not last another couple of years. And that's the scariest thing. And so now it's kind of course correcting for me is, for someone who currently doesn't have finances coming in, having to care for a family and figuring out what new direction it is, but also being very hard lined about no, you're not going to use your credit card unless it's an absolute like emergency, or if you're just pumping gas, because that's where I'm at. I'll do
right,
that because I want the rewards, right? But then I'm just like, well, if I can't pay that back by Friday, then there's no, or as soon as it hits my credit, then there's no point in doing that for me personally. So.
right. Yeah. No, it's a lot, Sean. That's why we'll have to I'll have you back on so we can continue talking and seeing and navigating all of this. And also, when you're having your podcast behind the scenes, same thing. See how everyone's doing financially. Maybe they'll be open to talking about their credit a little bit, because I'll definitely be tuning in to listen.
Well,
And because I love the behind the scenes and all that good.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I do just love it's just that's where we've come. It's just hearing everybody's story. And there's so many. crew members like myself or even actors. It's like you got into it for a sole purpose. And so that's the whole goal is um, telling the story that matters and just some insight into what we do, because what we do in our industry is extremely tough and it's not guaranteed and it's very cutthroat. And you're always kind of wondering, sometimes it's not even about being in the moment. You're just thinking about what's coming next. And that's kind of the worst thing because we all get into what we do because we love it and we want to. And then sometimes you get that inside look. And it's not always necessarily a negative aspect. It's just, some things are not what they seem. And so that's just kind of the fun thing to talk about it.
Yes,
So yeah.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this today.
Yes, of course, Jeannie. I love talking to you, and I hope your listeners get some perspective and take your advice. I know that I do, and it's helped me,
Oh,
and I'm so thankful. And yeah, and if you want behind the scenes aspect in industry, then yeah, Doors World. It's a
I'm going to
behind the
put
scenes
the link
podcast.
in.
Yes, yes. And it's been a whole, I revamped the whole channel because um I felt I was a little kind of I was a little bit in a strict box before, but it wasn't working for me. And now I'm kind of just, and again, it's not a negative aspect, but I just want everybody to be able to just tell their story. And sometimes there's really some hard things to talk about. And everybody kind of has their own story. And really, what it is it's people like me who are figuring out where they're going next, people who have gotten out of the industry altogether, or people who are like, no, this is it. I got nothing else to do. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time. This has been a blast, and I'm
Yes,
sure we'll have many more conversations.
we
So,
will. Thank you so much, Sean.
yes, we'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, bye.